Excited for Black Myth Wukong but worried your PC won't handle it? No problem. Today, we're counting down 10 plus games that capture the same epic mythological vibe, filled with intense combat, massive bosses, and fantasy worlds, all perfect for low-end PCs. Let's jump in. Set in feudal Japan, Onimusha, warlords combine sword-based combat and supernatural enemies, much like Black Myth Wukong's mythological roots. Fast-paced combat, boss battles, and a rich historical setting make this an action-packed classic. Best of all, it only needs Windows 7, a Pentium 4 processor, 2GB RAM. So it's great for low-end PCs. Featuring fast, fluid parkour and melee combat, Prince of Persia: Forgotten Sands shares that acrobatic fighting style that we're likely to see in Black Myth Wukong. You battle massive enemies and use powers tied to nature, giving off a magical, mythological vibe. And don't worry, you can run it with Windows XP, a Core 2 Duo processor, 1GB RAM, and a GeForce 6800, so it's not too demanding. Devil May Cry 4 delivers fast, combo-heavy combat with a focus on stylish, flashy moves, much like what we expect from Black Myth Wukong. Epic boss fights, smooth controls, and stunning set pieces will keep you glued to the screen. It's light on system demands too, requiring just Windows 7, an Intel Core 2 Duo CPU, 2GB RAM, and a GeForce 8800. In The Witcher 2, you step into a dark fantasy world where mythological creatures and magical abilities play a huge role. Much like Black Myth Wukong, it's all about strategic combat, mystical lore, and intense monster battles. Even with its rich detail, you'll need only Windows XP, an Intel Core 2 Duo, 2GB RAM, and a GeForce 8800 to experience it. With a darker tone, Prince of Persia: Warrior Within brings more brutal combat and boss fights, similar to Wukong. The game combines fluid, acrobatic movement with fast-paced sword fighting, making it a classic for fans of action RPGs, plus, it runs on Windows 2000, with a 1GHz Pentium 3, 256MB RAM, and a DirectX 9 compatible video card. Shadow of Mordor is all about slaying mythological beasts in fast, fluid combat. The open world, intense melee action, and epic boss fights are reminiscent of what Black Myth Wukong aims to deliver. Even with all this action, you only need Windows 7, 4GB RAM to experience the adventure. Darksiders throws you into a post-apocalyptic world full of mythological creatures and massive bosses. The hack-and-slash combat and larger-than-life enemies give off that Black Myth Wukong vibe, especially with its focus on mythology. It's pretty accessible too, needing just Windows XP, a Pentium 4, 1GB RAM, and a GeForce 8800. In Castlevania, Lords of Shadow, you fight mythical creatures, unravel dark magic, and battle gigantic bosses. Like Black Myth Wukong, the game focuses on fluid combat, exploring a mythologically rich world, and intense action sequences. It's also optimized well, only requiring Windows XP, a Core 2 Duo processor, 2GB RAM, and a GeForce 8800 GT. Mixing magic and melee combat, Dark Messiah of Might and Magic brings you into a world of fantasy and myth. Like Wukong, you'll face large, terrifying creatures, using both strategic combat and powerful abilities to win the day. And the best part? It only needs Windows XP, a Pentium 4, 512MB RAM, and a GeForce 6600 to run. Dark Souls is known for its punishing difficulty and intense, mythological world filled with monstrous bosses. Just like in Black Myth Wukong, you'll need to master its complex combat system and take down myth-inspired creatures. Despite its epic scope, all you need is Windows XP, an Athlon 64 processor, 2GB RAM, and a GeForce 9600 GT. Want to climb massive mythological creatures during combat? Dragon's Dogma has you covered. With its mix of fast-paced melee combat and epic boss fights, it gives you a feeling that's similar to Black Myth Wukong's mythical and action-packed world. Even better, it only asks for Windows Vista, an Intel Core 2 Duo, 2GB RAM, and a GeForce 8800 GTS to run smoothly. Blending acrobatic combat with mystical powers, Prince of Persia: Two Thrones gives you that same mythical hero vibe we're expecting from Black Myth Wukong. The duality of the hero's powers and the fast-paced parkour combat keep the action intense. You only need Windows XP, a 1GHz Pentium 3, 256MB RAM, and a GeForce 3 for this classic. Inspired by Journey to the West, like Black Myth Wukong, Enslaved gives you a mix of combat, platforming, and a beautifully crafted world filled with mythological themes. It's a perfect match for those who want fast-paced action and a rich narrative. With just Windows XP, a 2.2 GHz dual-core, 2 GB RAM, and a GeForce 9600 GT, it runs on almost any machine. The Sands of Time is all about fluidity in combat and movement, much like Black Myth Wukong. The ability to control time and the mythical setting gives it a magical atmosphere that's highly reminiscent of the Wukong journey. And with requirements as low as Windows 98, a Pentium 3, 256 MB RAM, and a GeForce 2, it's perfect for older systems. And there you have it. These games not only share a similar mythical vibe and action-packed combat to Black Myth Wukong, but they also run smoothly on lower-end PCs. So, no matter your system, you'll still be able to enjoy these mythological adventures. Which one are you picking up next? Let me know in the comments below.